Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back once again to the briefing room. Yes, indeed, folks, my name is Eric Cavanaugh. I will be your moderator for today's event in which we're going to talk about, let's face it, one of the hottest topics out there, not just big data, no, but big data and other data in the context of predictive analytics. That is the topic for today, the new normal, putting predictive analytical power in the hands of users on the front line. That's what we're going to be talking about today. So there is a slide about yours truly and enough about me. So as many of you know, the mission of the briefing room is to reveal the essential characteristics of enterprise technology. So we take innovative vendors and we put them online for live analyst briefings with independent analysts from all over the world, quite frankly. Today we've got Mike Ferguson dialing in from across the pond over in London, so big thanks to him for joining us late in his day. So we cover a different topic every month, and the reason is we want you as the audience to have apples-to-apples comparisons of what these different technologies do, how they work, and whether or not they apply to your particular needs. As many of you know, when you're trying to buy some of these software packages, it's a daunting task because it's very difficult to understand exactly how certain technologies work, what are the nuances, what is the kernel of technology underneath, where is it applicable, how does it play well with other technologies. That's always a big, big issue, especially if you're dealing with the major vendors, and then of course all those second and third tier vendors as well. They all innovate, they do things in different ways, and sometimes they work well with certain technologies and sometimes they don't. So the purpose of the briefing room is to give you that very clear perspective on what a particular technology is, how it works, and whether or not it's suitable for you. So I love this abstract slide here. We talk about different kinds of insight here in the briefing room, and of course foresight is what we're really focused on in the realm of predictive analytics. And I can tell you, we were chatting before the show, and Mike had mentioned this term disruptive, and boy, he could not pick a better term to describe what is happening in the field of enterprise software, because there are so many innovations on so many levels affecting so many layers of the technology stack, and also affecting hardware. We shouldn't forget about the improvements in hardware or the improvements in certain open source movements. We keep hearing about Hadoop, of course, the open source project that is changing the way people can use large data sets. But Hadoop, in and of itself is a fascinating thing, but you really need to weave it into an information architecture and get some analytical capabilities stacked on top of it. There is some stuff baked into the Hadoop open source movement, certainly, but there's so much data out there, folks, and there are so many different kinds of data. And this is the problem with so-called big data. It's not necessarily just that it's big, it's that it's downright unwieldy. So what we're seeing is a whole bunch of different vendors finding very creative ways to help you grab some of that data, process it effectively, and then be able to run analytical algorithms on the data to get a better feel for what is happening out there in your world, in your marketplace, for your business. And one of the more disruptive things that's happening now, it seems to me, is that, just 2 years ago, if you wanted to do some predictive analytics, odds are it was going to cost you a fortune, and also it would be very difficult unless you had highly trained people who are able to build predictive models, test those models, implement those models, then gauge how well they're working, tweak them over time, so on and so forth. That was a task done by a very small number of highly specialized staff. So what's happening now, and you heard it here a couple years ago in the briefing room, we talked about this, is we're seeing all these vendors create some very nice, very clean, what you might call service layers that sit on top of all this data and allow you to do work in more of a traditional style business manager workflow that lets not just analytical professionals or highly trained, highly skilled people use these technologies, but also just business users, line of business managers, people who are operating departments or divisions, or people who would not traditionally be using these kinds of tools. So that is the focus for today. We're going to talk about how end users, just regular business people, can use these kinds of tools. And yes, still, it's pretty complex stuff. It's not like you open it up, install the software, and hit the red button and you get insights. No, it's a process. So we're going to see what that process looks like. So I mentioned Mike Ferguson. Goodness, we haven't had Mike in the briefing room since December of 2011. So we're very, very happy to have him online. He's a very busy guy. He's all over the world speaking, going to conferences, and of course, doing consultative work, so we're very pleased to have him dialing in from his hotel room in London. And Alteryx, this is a very interesting company. Alteryx unveiled a rather significant upgrade, if you will, or new version of their software just, I guess, about a year and a half ago. These guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember them from before they changed their name. So I've been following these guys for quite some time now, about 5 or 6 years, I suppose, and they've got some big clients. They made some great improvements working with huge companies like Walmart, for example. So they've got a lot of experience out there, and they have really gone into the research and development realm over the past year and a half, and have rolled out some really interesting technologies for changing the way that analytics is done. So you can see they mentioned the strategic analytics software, which is a desktop-to-cloud solution. This is very interesting stuff. So we have Matt Madden, Senior Product Marketing Manager over at Alteryx. He comes from SPSS, so he's been around in the rank and file of the predictive analytical world for quite some time. Happy to have him on board. And with that, I'm going to hand Matt the keys to the WebEx. And Matt, if you just click on that slide and use the down arrow, the floor is yours.
All right. Thanks, Eric. And thanks, Eric, once again for allowing us to attend your briefing room in this session. So let's jump right in. You know, the new normal, the predictive power to the front lines. How do organizations make predictive analytics accessible to not just the data scientists, not just the statisticians or the PhDs? How do they make it accessible to either, you know, the point of sale or point of contact employees, or to the business analysts to help build those analytical data sets and consume that, or excuse me, create those analytic applications that can be consumed throughout the organization? So when it comes to decision making, it really starts with the data. As many of you are aware, and you know, if you're not aware of this, you know, it's something you really need to be cognizant of. The amount of data continues to grow. Not only the amount of data, but the amount of data sources are expanding exponentially. And many organizations that are able to access and take advantage of these new sources, such as social media, RFID tags, etc., are going to be successful or continue to be successful. But with all this big data and new data, it only creates more questions, which in turn means more decisions need to be made, and more decisions can actually be made with this new data as well. Doesn't matter how much data you have if you can't get the right information out of it. That's why and where big data along with predictive analytics can play a major role. So utilizing the power of predictive analytics allows organizations to not only focus on the data, but also dig in and find the characteristics of the data to focus on, which will allow them to gain the most insight from all of this different disparate types of data. So this could be in different forms. It could be in the form of a predictive model that allows you to focus on customer churn, those people that are most likely to leave your organization from a customer standpoint. It allows you to market to characteristics of people that are most likely to respond to, let's say, a direct mail campaign, all the way to how do I stock my shelves correctly to maximize my inventory. It really comes down to being more proactive instead of reactive. So when we talk about analytics or the logical progression of analysis, it starts with establishing a tradition of business intelligence, right? What started out as a reporting aspect, determining what is happening, what's going on right now, through the introduction of monitoring, you know, what's happening now through dashboards and scorecards, which is something that can almost, in essence, be considered real time, right? The monitoring, scorecarding. And it evolved into something that became really evident, as Eric described, over the last few years. A lot of the vendors, from a BI standpoint, really started to understand that there was something missing in terms of getting more value from their analysis. And that's when the predictive aspect came into play, or really figuring out what might happen or what's going to happen in the future. And this is evident from, you know, the IBM acquisition of SPSS, MicroStrategy, Oracle, SAS has always been there. But other organizations that are traditionally BI vendors implementing some sort of predictive aspect into their business. They not only understand the importance of it, but they also realize that predictive analytics can represent the highest value from an analysis and decision-making standpoint. But what was critical to them and what's going to be critical to them in the future is how do they really make that predictive analytics something that can be used and implemented, not just by the statistician, not just by the PhD, because historically predictive analytics required, some sort of aspect of this. And not only that, what's becoming more critical is the cost of hiring these types of people, these data scientists. I saw an article or blog actually recently from the Wall Street Journal that said some data scientists are commanding, hundreds of thousands of dollars in salary. So how do we take advantage from an organizational standpoint of your current resources, your current employees? How do we make predictive analytics something that, not just anybody can use, but somebody that knows the business, somebody that has some sort of insight into the business to really take that analysis to the next level and help with the decision-making process. So when we look at, the traditional way, the old way of getting, from question to insight, it doesn't really work anymore. And here's a few reasons why. There's a huge potential business value of predictive analytics, and many organizations have put up with the process that are really inefficient when delivering that value. For instance, it can be time-consuming because usually there's multiple tools and individuals that need to be involved in different types of steps. You can't just have the business analyst or business user really take full lead in that entire process. The preparing and integrating of that data, applying those predictive techniques, analyzing and sharing results can be extremely time-consuming, and it's not uncommon that with a traditional approach, these predictive deployments can actually take, almost many man-months to years to really get the process started and implemented. In addition, I touched on this a little bit more earlier. A lot of times they require specialized skills. Now, what I talked about were skills from a predictive standpoint. That's, the statistician, the PhD, or some sort of heavy program. But it also starts into the data access and data integration standpoint. A lot of times, the traditional approach would require someone with deep data access and modeling experience to tackle these problems of extracting and integrating these data from multiple disparate data sources. And then beyond that, once the data is integrated, then the data scientist or statistician can take a look at the data and try to determine what their business problem is and how they can actually develop the right analytical techniques to predict the results. Expensive, right? Beyond the expense of people expertise, the traditional approach has involved multiple different software tools, right? You need an ETL tool, a query and reporting tool, for instance. Then you would need the predictive side, and then the delivery standpoint. It could be from a visualization standpoint or a dashboarding standpoint. And then finally, the traditional approach and results were really hard to iterate. So in business, answers often lead to more questions, especially when it comes to things like predictive analytics. So as a business user, maybe you finally get an answer that you're looking for that's going to predict what your first year of sales are in a new store. Then your manager turns around and says, okay, well, what if we target a different location and spent 40% more on the marketing budget? That's going to require an iteration, and in the traditional approach, that's difficult because the same discrete individuals and systems need to be involved to produce that next answer. You have to go all the way back to the person that's going to be extracting the data, reworking the data set, allowing you to really get that crisp data set that you need to run the analysis you need. The difficulty that lies in there is people that are doing the data integration may not know the business as well as, say, the business analyst that really needs to get the results they need, knows exactly what they're looking for, and sometimes cannot relate the correct steps to that data integration specialist. This is where Alteryx takes a different approach. What we do is we can really change the way organizations harness the value of predictive analytics, and we do it much faster and at a lower cost. So we deliver a faster time from question to insight by bringing historically disparate tools together into a single environment. We shrink the time window from business questions to predictive insight. And within competitive markets, this can really help you outmaneuver the competition. We don't have to go through the multiple steps of multiple different people touching the data, cleaning the data, hoping to get the data right. There's no specialized skills required. We empower what we call the data artisan, not necessarily the data scientists. These are people that usually are within your organization already, don't necessarily have the statistician background, but do have some sort of analytic prowess. So they have a general understanding of analytics and can really take our tool and take the analysis to the next level. From a lower cost standpoint, we provide the same capabilities as a traditional predictive stack, but integrate it into one environment. This way you don't have to license, deploy, and maintain multiple separate tools, which can dramatically lower both the total ownership cost. And then finally, we are iteration friendly. The integrated environment and ability for a data artisan to really self-serve with that predictive analytics makes it much easier to iterate as business questions change and evolve. We don't have to, from a business analyst standpoint, pull any other personnel to manage the data or extract the data or create that data set for us. So how do we do that from an architectural standpoint? At the core of our architecture, we're really from a production to consumption standpoint, or production to consumption model. So if you look at the bottom, it really starts with the key people that are in charge of maintaining these data sources or data systems of records, such as IT and data warehousing environments. This could be through your traditional data warehouse, such as Oracle, or your NoSQL, such as MongoDB, Hadoop, or all the way to big data discovery, such as Teradata or Astrodata, and even down to the desktop level. So a lot of times your transactional data could be in a data warehouse, but you may have some data that's stored on your desktop within an Excel file. So being able to take advantage and ingest all this data, if you move up to the middle section there, you're able to apply all the data integration and analytical capabilities, utilize or take advantage of in-database analytics, such as within Teradata and Aster, or even being able to output data as well. So take all the data from multiple sources, integrate that data, and upload it into your traditional data warehouse, for instance. A number of our customers actually use Alteryx to create analytic data sets that can be consumed in third-party products as well, such as Tableau. We can then take these data sets and utilize the approach to build an analytic workflow that can be used as a specific file format, or even create an analytical application that can be used or consumed without, can be consumed within your organization or environment. So how does this work? It's a several-step workflow approach, right? We're able to access all relevant data, integrate that data from any data source, cleanse it, enhance it. We even allow organizations to enrich data with third-party data that we package with the product, perform sophisticated analytics that we'll go into a little more detail around, and then apply that data and assemble an application, an analytical application that can then be published to either a private or a public cloud and run from those different locations. So if we take a look at the integration standpoint, or the access standpoint, I should say, you know, there's all types of different emerging data sources. The 3 V's, as many of you know, reflect the big data aspect. We're able to access all relevant data regardless of where it's stored. We have capabilities to access any data source via ODBC, but we also have direct connectors into Hadoop, MongoDB, Teradata, for instance, Salesforce.com, that allow business analysts to directly access the data from their desktop. It allows you to easily integrate these non-traditional data sources and leverage the technology and cost advantages for these different platforms. So I touched a little bit on this earlier, but this is something that's very unique to Alteryx, is the ability to include third-party data for more of a complete picture when it comes to getting the most out of your analysis. We include with our software U.S. Census data. We're actually the engine, the analytical engine provider for the U.S. Census data. We also include Experian household data, done in Bradstreet firmographics, and TomTom spatial data. And some of the unique aspects that we really provide from a traditional standpoint is that, you know, we also include all this data regardless of what software you have, and it can really enrich some of the different data sets you have. So if you're short on sample data, if you're short on household information, or you're trying to find out who are the best people I want to mail to, enriching your data with something like Experian can really improve your campaign efforts. So, you know, moving predictive analytics to the front line, what we do from a traditional analysis standpoint is we have another unique aspect. You know, we offer a lot of the same traditional analytical capabilities that a lot of people do, but the other thing we also offer is some highly complex spatial analysis. And then finally, we can deliver the most value when we focus today, where we're focusing today is around predictive analytics. What we typically do from a business user standpoint, or business analyst and frontline employee, is we deliver the analytics into something that can be used by the layman person. They don't need to know any sort of statistical programming. They don't have to be a statistician. You know, obviously, anytime you're doing predictive analytics, if you do have some sort of analytical background, it's going to be easier for you to understand and easier for you to run. What we do is we allow users to utilize R scripting, copy them directly from R and into our workflow. But in addition to that, what we do is we harness the power of R. We have over 20 prepackaged R algorithms that are wrapped up into what you see here on the screen. And Richard will actually go into a little bit more around this in the demo as well. But this way, you don't have to know any scripting. It's all right there in the package, drag and drop environment. You pull the procedure you want to run into the workflow to help you produce the output you need. Once that's done, it can then be wrapped up into an analytical application that can be published to the web, pushed out to the front line of your employees, so that, let's say, somebody that's on the phone from an insurance standpoint can look at a claims, talking to somebody that's looking to submit a claim, they would have the idea of what they should do next from a decision standpoint. So one of the customers we have that's really utilizing predictive analytics is an organization called Southern States. Many of you may not be aware of who they are, but Southern States Cooperative is the largest farmer-owned cooperative in the U.S. They actually have over 300,000 farmer members, and what they do is they rely on purchasing, manufacturing, and processing of feed, seed, fertilizer, and other farm supplies, and they actually serve over 1,200 retail locations in 23 different states. And a majority of their business is actually done through a catalog that they mail. And one of the challenges they had is they wanted to be able to bring customer and marketing data together from multiple sources. They also wanted to have consistency in their tools that help drive marketing analytics. I think currently they were using, or in the past they were using, a combination of Excel and some different types of customer tools. And the other thing they found from using these different tools is they really lacked sophisticated analytics to really drive improvements in their business, specifically in this catalog mailing. They wanted to be able to really optimize the catalog mailing so that they were getting the catalog to the right people at the right time. So utilizing Alteryx, what they were able to do using predictive analytics specifically in Alteryx, they focused the analytics on a specific target market and improved the response rates by 63%. And by targeting these mailings, actually improved gross margin for each of their campaigns. So that's a brief, quick glance at some of the things Alteryx has to offer. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Richard Snow so that he can give you a quick demo of the product itself. Richard?
Yeah, great, thanks. And I'll be pretty quick here. I know we're running a little short on time, but just really wanted to give you an idea for what it's like to interact with the Alteryx application and how easy some of these predictive applications can be. I'm going to go ahead and share my desktop to go ahead and share the application so you guys can see what it looks like. All right, so what you should be seeing now is the Alteryx desktop application. This is where we actually build out those analytic workflows that we're talking about. And like has been mentioned, Alteryx has the power and the capability to bring in lots of different data sources, perform ETL, data integration, lots of different things on the data. But today we're going to focus on the predictive applications and how you might interact with some of those and the ease of use around that. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually bring in an analytic data set that I've already prepared using Alteryx, so it's nice and clean. I've joined all the data together for me for this particular application, again, since we're going to be focused on the predictive side of things. But the idea is along the left-hand side, we have tools that perform jobs. Here in the center is a canvas where we build out a workflow. So the idea is that you take tools from our toolbox here. We drag and drop them on the canvas to start to build out an analytic process. With an input tool, as I drag it in, it asks for me to go ahead and configure that tool. In this case, it just would like for me to browse out to a file source. Right now, I'm going to browse to a file that's just sitting on my file system, but you can see in here that I have the ability to make database connections, ODB and ODBC database connections to Teradata databases, Hadoop through Hive, Netezza, Oracle, SQL, so on and so forth. But today, we're just going to take a look at a file sitting on my file system. And even the files on your file system that we can bring in, Excel files, flat files, CSV files, things like that. Today, we're going to take a look at a proprietary file format that we have here. I'm just going to bring in a little bit of data, and in here what we're going to try to do is actually predict this consumer behavior. In this case, it's just a flag with the yes or no, based off of some other RFM sorts of marketing measures. So we've got, again, a behavior field, a frequency, a couple of recency fields, and then a couple of marketing fields that says whether an individual has responded to telephone response, or responded to telephone marketing, or also from mail marketing. So in Alteryx, what we can do is drop straight down to our predictive tool set, and these are the list of tools that have been mentioned that Alteryx kind of has packaged up around some R scripting that makes some of those things easy to use. And what we'll do now is I'm just going to quickly drop down into the model that I wanted to take a look at today, and that's actually going to be a forest model. So as I bring a data set in, I can start to perform different analytics to this. What you might want to do first is actually take a look at some association analysis, or to do some variable plotting. But right now, let's just go ahead and pull out a forest model. We can drag and drop that onto the canvas. In order for me to configure this predictive application, instead of having to do any coding or anything like that, I can actually just make simple selections as a line of business user. So in here, I would like to name my model. I'm just going to call it a forest model. I want to predict behavior, so my target's going to be the behavior, and I want to predict it based off of those variables that I brought in, the frequency, a couple of recency variables, and some responses to past marketing elements. What I'll do at this point is I'm just going to bring in what's called a browse tool, and this just allows me to view my data. So the idea is that we're bringing in data, we're going to pass it to a predictive process, in this case a forest model, and then we're just going to take a look at that output using a browse tool. The browse tool, again, is just a tool that allows me to kind of look at my data in process. We'll go ahead and execute this application. The data is going to come in. We're going to take a look at that data. It's being passed to a forest model, and then we're going to take a look at the results of that forest model so we can start to understand some of what has come out of there. Here we've got a nice summary report for this particular forest model that describes what went into the model, and then the confusion matrix, so I can start to understand how well I was able to classify things based off of this forest model. And then, of course, at the bottom, the variable importance plot. So this tells me what sort of impacts each one of these variables was able to have in the forest, or I guess the tree models that the forest created. So based off of this, I can say that this recency variable had the most important or had the most impact on the models, whereas the frequency actually had the least impact on the models. And if we scroll back up here, we can see based off of the confusion matrix that I can see my classification error based off of the model. So I can see how accurate this model is able to predict things. And real quickly, what I'm able to do is actually take these applications and publish them up to the public cloud. And I was just going to show you that really quickly. If you go to gallery.alteryx.com, you all can see this exact same application today. I've taken, this is a little bit more fleshed out application where we're bringing in data and performing some inventory analysis, and we're going to output a nicely formatted report to be able to do analysis on. So if you go up to the gallery and you log in, you're able to run this predictive inventory analysis application. And in here, I've given the user the ability to make some selections. What store do I want to do analysis on? What categories or products do I want to do my inventory analysis on? And what date range or for purchasing behavior do I want to take a look at? I can run this application here on the web, and whenever it's complete, I'm able to take a look at this output. This is the PDF output from this report. So it's going to give me some summary level information, and what this report's trying to do is take a look at past purchasing behavior of some particular products and tell me when I should be ordering more of that product based off of again, past purchasing behavior and shipping estimates based off of when those products, how long it would take those products to be shipped to my store. So in this case, I'm able to flag certain products I'm overdue on ordering, whereas other products I'm getting close. And if I scroll down a little bit more, we can see some detailed information about each one of the products, what the past purchasing behavior looked like, the predictive trend that I was able to apply to that, and detailed information about how many days I think I'm going to have left of product on my shelf and when I should go ahead and start ordering more of that product. So I know that's a pretty quick overview about what's going on, but we did just want to show you briefly what it would be like to interact within Alteryx and perform some of these predictive applications. Again, just dragging and dropping a tool, making some selections. But at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and turn things back over to Matt to go ahead and finish things off for us.
Actually, yeah, let me give it back to Matt. I put it over to Mike, but hold on one second.
Sorry.
Oh, okay, there you go. Matt, you've got the floor.
Thanks, Richard. And keep in mind, Richard by no means is a statistician or has a PhD in predictive analytics. I just want to make a note of that. So in conclusion, when it comes to predictive analytics, organizations need to adapt from that backward, looking the reactive to being more proactive. You have to look beyond your traditional data sources, especially in this day and age, and deliver those predictive analytics to either the line of business or the frontline employees. And we do have a unique approach to this. We have a broader accessibility for predictive analytics through integration with R. much lower cost and complexity from a multiple tool standpoint. We have a single solution, and we also deliver deeper insight into data, whether it's social media, big data, and enrichment through third-party data sources. So if there's any questions or you want to find out more information about us, you can visit our website, follow us on Twitter, and you can even go to the analytics gallery that Richard was just showing and try it out as much as you like as well.
All right, and with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mike Ferguson. Mike, just click anywhere on that spot and use the down arrow, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Great to be back in the briefing room after a whole year, I think. I'll just move myself to here. Here I am. Okay, so what I'd like to do is just quickly do a quick presentation and then start to pose some questions to Alteryx on the basis of what I'm going to cover and of what was being demonstrated. So what I want to just briefly say is, obviously, traditional data warehousing has been frequently talked about in the context of two terms: data warehousing and business intelligence. Data warehousing being the building of data stores containing data that is optimized for analysis and reporting, and business intelligence being the producing of insights from that data through analysis in order to make that those insights actionable for people to make decisions on to optimize their business. So that said, we're seeing an era now where self-service BI is very much the dominant situation. But I would say, getting back to slide, self-service BI referring more to the right-hand side of this chart rather than the left-hand side of it. But it's clearly there, businesses are taking control to try and become more self-sufficient, build their own insights, and share those with others in order to allow them to act more rapidly and responsibly. And we'll be seeing there's a number of ways in which you can do self-service BI. One is data discovery and visualization tools, and another one is the kind of analytical workflow and visualization tools that we've seen just demonstrated with Alteryx. But generally speaking, it's more about the BI side as opposed to the self-service data warehousing side, because clearly what you'd like is for business users who are using these kinds of tools to be able to access consistent, commonly understood data that's as opposed to reinventing the wheel and driving inconsistency through everybody creating multiple different versions of the same thing. So what we're seeing in a way is two options: self-service BI data discovery tools and visualization tools, where you can connect to data warehouses and other data sources, in this case an insurance example, produce some insights and then share those with a community of users who can then consume it and act on it. And so we kind of have the distinction between information producers on the left and information consumers on the right. Equally, it could be an analytical workflow development, a visualization tool could take on this responsibility. But these kinds of tools becoming available out there in the business, and most certainly dominating what's happening at the moment, is also giving some rise to the whole issue of data management, and I'll talk to that in a second. But clearly also predictive analytics are being added into these kinds of tools, and that means that those kinds of tools can either run those predictive models in the self-service BI tool, if you like, itself on their server, or alternatively, down, as you can see down in the data warehouse there, another predictive model running down in the database. And so we get better performance by pushing the analytics closer to the underlying data. The challenge here is really for a business analyst who's not skilled is to know which of these algorithms to potentially use. But I highlighted the point about data management. I think what we're seeing now is a number of end users not only doing self-service BI, but doing self-service DI, data integration. And so that's giving rise, if you like, to concerns about inconsistency of different data definitions, maybe performing same calculations differently without knowing it, and other people around the organization doing the same kind of thing, creating their own set of data. And when you start to share things, and there's a potential concern of inconsistency coming from that, and people not necessarily sure about whether this data is indeed trusted or not. And so there's a possibility that they can have a potential increase in overlapping data sets, different versions of data sets that could be scattered around the organization and potentially breed inconsistency as a result. One way to counteract that is to hide multiple data stores and try and do the data integration on the fly through data virtualization, in which case leave the self-service BI capability up to the business analyst and not have to worry about integrating data, but do it through a virtual layer. Of course, a analytical workflow tool could do the same thing themselves through cleaning up and integrating the data like we saw in Alteryx. But clearly what we're trying to do is make information easy to access. And then once we share it, then clearly, we want to govern this whole environment, govern what business analysts and information producers can access and how they name the data, and then govern the distribution, and from a consumer perspective, govern who can access what information from what devices, and do they understand what's being talked about. Also, we heard about big data, and what we're seeing is these new sources of data becoming available that businesses now want to analyze, and many of those are coming from outside the organization, whether those be social network kind of data or sensor data or other forms of information as well. And that's giving rise to new analytical workloads over and above what traditional data warehousing offers. And so we're seeing 6 new workloads that I've shown here, everything from exploratory analytics on model data. There's no data model in the case of multi-structured data, through to graph analytics, which of course could be a very specific kind of social network influencer analysis, for example. And so what we're seeing is the emergence of multiple data stores, multiple analytical data stores beyond the data warehouse themselves. One example of that is Hadoop. I think Eric talked about that at the beginning of this presentation, where data scientists can bring data in and do exploratory analytics on data that's not very well understood, and in many cases doesn't have a data model at all. So it's quite different from data warehousing per se. Another popular use case that I'm seeing is the ability to accelerate ETL processing through bringing data into a cheap environment, low-cost environment like Hadoop, and running transformations on that data in that environment to produce insights, to bring data into a place where we already know a lot in a data warehouse, so we can bring additional insights in there to enrich what we already know. But that means that, of course, data integration has to start to cater for these more complex data types, to be able not only to just load data in or transform it, but maybe parse it and extract phrases and things like that from those kinds of data sources like text or email. And then we have a bigger problem, which is data coming at organizations faster than they can consume it. And so they have to speed up the process by which they can filter these data sources and bring them into the enterprise to take advantage of getting competitive edge and make decisions on. And so that's pushing us beyond just parsing and extracting data and transforming it, but also can we introduce analytics into the workflow in order to effectively embed analytics in this workflow processing in order to quickly extract value out of it and bring it into our organization for blending with other data. And it also opens up, because we've now got multiple analytical platforms available, a new phenomenon, which is more complex queries, more complex questions. People beginning to ask questions that require you to run analytical workload components across multiple analytical platforms in order to answer it, rather than just running it on one or another. And so what we now move into is this world of multi-platform analytical workflows, where I can embed analytics not only in the workflow, but also I can chain them together. I can nest them and have them create insights which move to other platforms for further analytics as well. And so we get this concept of multi-platform analytics beginning to appear. So that kind of was my discussion. So I just wanted to then, on the basis of what I've said here, is to just open up questions and get to know Alteryx a little bit more. Look at how they position themselves in their product. How do they deal with this issue of data governance? Since I noticed on one of the slides that they talked about personal ETL. So if everybody's doing personal ETL, how do they deal with that kind of problem? And let's look at analytical workflows and the kinds of analytical workflows that Alteryx is providing, and how does it work with these big data platforms that have emerged over recent years. And also, given the fact that we've got multiple analytical workflows being created and published, and then a whole bunch of consumers coming in potentially off of various devices and running these things, how does Alteryx scale to handle potentially an unknown number of information consumers who want to run these things, these analytical applications that are produced by Alteryx? So if I could start the questions then. So Matt, maybe you could give me an idea about what is, if I'm an existing shop who has already got a data warehousing environment. It's been around for a while. I've got ETL. I've got big data connectivity maybe in my latest version of my ETL tool. I've got data mining somewhere in my organization and a BI platform.
Sure.
Why would I buy Alteryx? I mean, what's it going to give me that's different from an existing investment?
Sure. First off, I would say that Alteryx can be a tremendous complement to really any sort of existing infrastructure, regardless if it's an existing ETL tool or BI platform. In fact, we have a lot of customers, current customers, that have a lot of these different types of tools, all right? But what Alteryx does is it gives flexibility to the analyst. And what I mean by this is it allows the analyst to directly access the data, do that data blending or data integration that you touched on a little bit there before, without really having to rely on the IT department or the data warehousing team to do that data integration for them. We like to look at it from 3 different aspects, and that can be from data to analysis to production, right? The analyst gets access to all the data they need to perform any type of analysis they want, from your traditional BI, traditional statistics, to spatial, to predictive, and then produce either a static report or some sort of analytical application that can be consumed through others throughout the organization or outside the organization. So we think we're a little unique in the aspect that, we're not really focused on an entire enterprise deployment. We're looking at more from a business analyst or line of business aspect. Right.
So if I was looking at Alteryx, it's definitely a tool or a product aimed at the business analyst as opposed to an IT developer. Would that be the case?
Definitely.
Right. Okay. So in that sense, though, would you say? I mean, I highlighted the point about data governance. I appreciate what you're trying to show is the end-to-end capability of Alteryx, which I'll get to in a second. But on the data governance issue, if everybody's doing their own data integration and blending of data and cleansing and everything else, how do you stop anarchy setting in here with everybody repeating and reinventing rather than reusing?
Well, you know, it's a little tricky when it comes from an organizational standpoint. I think, you know, obviously we have direct connectors to different types of data sources, different types of abilities to get at that data, but some of that, you know, data governance and restriction is still going to rely upon IT and whether or not they're still going to have some sort of, you know, very restrictive aspects to getting to that data. One way we can do it is we can take advantage of some of the data that's already been created within the data warehouse. I mentioned the word data blending, and what that does is it allows you to take what we refer to as data blending is we take an existing data set that may already be within a data warehouse or something that's been joined together from IT department and run some sort of data blending, really focusing on trying to highlight a specific business problem to answer. So we're not really messing with the entire data set in that instance. The other way we do it is, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, Richard showed a whole raft of different, if you like, tooling capabilities on the left-hand side of the Alteryx product. I mean, is it the case that several ETL vendors nowadays can publish ETLs as web services? Can you call a web service inside of an Alteryx workflow? In which case, just invoke, you know, pre-built ETLs that business users don't have to worry about figuring out how to do integration all by themselves, and can they get reused? Can you do that kind of thing?
Sorry, can you repeat that question again?
I can take that one. I can take that one, Matt, if you don't mind.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So yes, Alteryx can make different calls out to the web. You know, from taking a look at those tools, we actually have some kind of embedded applications to pull some data from the web using like a Salesforce connector and things like that. We actually have the ability to make out different API calls and things like that, or interact with things via command line to call outside programs or APIs to perform different analytics like what you're mentioning. One additional thing that I'll add to this question, and also I think it applies to your previous question, is that within Alteryx, you have the ability to take a workflow or an analytic that's been created and turn it into a best practice, what we would call like a macro that can then be shared across your organization. So if from a data governance perspective or from a methodology perspective, you would like to say that, hey, this is going to be the official way that an organization is going to do fuzzy matching or is going to do deduping, different things like that, you might say, you know, here's this tool. If you want to do that, you can use this tool to perform that analytic. And within Alteryx, it's really easy to take an analytic that you've created and turn it into a tool so that you can then share across the organization.
That was going to be my next question, actually, which is, you know, can I, you know, either get team development or sharing of these things to get reuse rather than reinvention? It looks like the answer is yes.
Definitely. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, so then the other thing there I noticed is that from a you've got a number of new algorithms, you've got predictive algorithms and so on. Is there any kind of help that a business analyst who's not skilled, you talked about 20 different packaged R algorithms, et cetera. I mean, clearly there's, you know, more and more of these could be potentially added. A couple of questions. One is, if you're a business analyst and you really don't know the difference between, you know, clustering and decision trees or whatever, is there any kind of wizards or capability that allows people to you know, easily choose the ones that are right for the kind of analysis that they want to do?
So one thing we do is we do have examples of how to use each of the predictive tools within the help menu, and we provide training on, you know, training courses that are specifically aimed at around best practices of using those predictive tools. And then finally, one thing that we're working on is our resident data scientist that has helped develop all these predictive tools is coming out with some more detailed book essentially on how to really utilize predictive analytics within Alteryx.
Okay. So predictive analytics, though, is something that you said it has been around for a while. I noticed you mentioned that you thought BI platforms were backward-looking, but several BI platforms that are out there today, have predictive analytics capability built into them. I can think of IBM Cognos. I can think of MicroStrategy, Microsoft SQL Server analysis services, even SAP Business Objects Predictive Analytics. I mean, all of these are products with predictive analytics capability, which is going into the BI platforms that many folks have. So, is the advantage here that if I'm able to access these kinds of capabilities in some of these business analyst-based BI tools, what's the differential?
So I guess what I mean there is a majority of these tools or these traditional vendors, for the most part, are still IT focused, right? So if you look at, let's say, IBM SPSS Modeler, the modeler aspect might be more that business analyst focused, but from an installation standpoint, if you're looking at the entire, enterprise solution, it's still at the BI level, IT focused. So, organizations are looking to become more agile when it comes to getting this types of analysis, which is why you see organizations like ClickView, the ClickViews of the world, having the amount of success they are. The IBMs, the SASs, the Oracles, the MicroStrategies all have great products and all, but for the most part, they're geared towards different users or different types of users than Alteryx. We really still believe in putting the power into the hands of the business analyst. And in addition, some of the predictive tools that these other traditional BI vendors have, whether they're integrated or not, they're still separate installations within that environment.
Right. So let me ask a little bit, turn my attention a little bit to the big data side. I mean, could you just say, obviously Hadoop was one of the sources that you can connect to. Could you just say which distributions of Hadoop right now Alteryx supports, please? Is it all of them, or is it?
No, it's not all of them. We do have access into Hortonworks. Is one aspect that we do have from a distribution standpoint.
Okay.
Other than that, I don't know what else we actually, are able to access.
And do you connect to that with via Hive or Pig, or do you go through a relational database function to get there? Or how do you get there?
Yeah, we actually access Hadoop through Hive, and then we still rely on the MapReduce for the data processing aspect. We are exploring support for, the ability to directly access the distribution file system, but nothing definitive in the works.
Okay, so but obviously, in these kind of environments, we're in a schemaless environment. A data warehouse, there is a schema, somebody designed it. Somebody then, then you can connect to it and access it. You put data into a kind of predefined model. In these kind of worlds, we're into a world where we don't even know what the model is yet, and so we're into the world of complete exploration. So, are we saying that Alteryx just magically knows any data inside of the Hadoop world, or are we, how does that work if we don't know what the schema is, or are you supporting text analytics inside of Alteryx, or what?
So, I guess the first part is, really our only access to Hadoop is via Hive. So the data must be coerced to a row major format, for instance, and the Hive is actually completely responsible for defining the schema of the data stored in Hadoop. So the tool Alteryx, when it actually is parsing the multi-structured formats. We have a number of examples where Alteryx is capable of reading and parsing file content not in a specific row or major format successfully. We can do that with great speed and efficiency. But at this time, we don't support reading directly into HDFS.
Okay.
And in terms of text analytics, we can make some sense of unstructured text, but we don't do anything like sentiment analysis where we would, be highlighting the positive and negative responses.
But if somebody archived data from a data warehouse that they couldn't afford to keep online into Hadoop, then you could certainly pick it up with Alteryx and do further analysis on that archived data. Would that be the case?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. What about, with data scientists are obviously out there in that environment, and I'm not suggesting for a moment that a business analyst tries to become a data scientist, but there's obviously benefits if data scientists have, run MapReduce programs and produced insights that, you could take advantage of the programs that they've built and say, rather than have to figure it out, just call this data scientist written MapReduce program and it figures it out for you and gives you the insight into an Alteryx environment. Are you able to kind of connect into Hadoop and like HCatalog or anything like that and find out what programs exist and bring those?
Yeah. So really, the only access we have into Hadoop is via Hive. So any other information related to Hadoop or its operations are currently unavailable.
So what about the whole good? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just going to say we've burned through an hour here. So once you have some more questions, then I'll throw some from the audience. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. So so let me ask a little bit about performance then. Clearly you got a lot of concurrent users potentially accessing the gallery that you publish stuff onto. You've got analytical workflows running, got predictive analytics running sometimes on huge volumes of data. Are you doing all of this analytics are you extracting the data out of these big data environments and doing it all in your server? Are you pushing analytics down into these environments to make them perform better down there? Or so on the one side you've got a big data volume problem to deal with, and how do you get performance there? And on the other side you've got all these concurrent users hitting it and running all of these analytics, in which case if you repeat the thing, if 20 users are calling the same analytical application, I mean, are you going to run it 20 times? Are you going to cache it once and have everybody get the rest for free? I mean, how do you deal with all of that scale that's coming at you?
So from a analytics gallery standpoint, if we have multiple consumers taking a look at the analytical applications, all of our data and the analytics gallery itself from a public cloud standpoint is stored on Amazon S3, or excuse me, Amazon Web Services. So really there shouldn't be any issues with running things concurrently. The other way we do license would be from a private cloud standpoint. So that is actually going to be relying upon the server itself. But from a desktop standpoint, all of our processing is done in memory. So that's kind of how we handle this speed and processing. Richard, I don't know, do you have anything else you want to add there?
Yeah, I would add that with certain databases, we push the analytics down in the database. Big example of that's going to be with Teradata. We take advantage of the in-database analytics for doing things like that. And with any of the databases we connect to, we push any sort of SQL query you might be running gets pushed down to the database. But specifically with Teradata and even with Teradata R and different things like that, we're really taking advantage of in-database analytics. And whatever gets returned can then be brought into Alteryx to do some other processing if needed.
Okay, great.
Well,
yeah, those were, by the way, folks, those are all, as I'm sure you figured out, very, very good, very probing questions, and kudos to the guys at Alteryx for answering all of them, because those are not easy questions. So we have some really good ones in the queue from the audience as well. So let's see. I guess I'll just throw it out to Alteryx, and either one of you can kind of jump on to whichever one. So let's see, one of the first questions was, what guidance do you offer non-expert users to select the appropriate techniques?
So
yeah,
I think we touched a little.
Yeah, you got it, man.
I was just going to say, I think we touched a little bit on this when it comes to, what kind of predictive tool to use. We do have some features within the help menu that will really help guide people from an example standpoint of when to use what type of technique or algorithm. In addition to that, we do offer, some extensive training courses that are very easily accessible that people can take advantage of as well.
Okay, I'm sure that's very useful stuff because there are so many possibilities in terms of how you build the workflow and what data sets you bring in, and that's actually a good segue to another question here. What are the limits on the number of input variables and the number of output variables that you can have?
The only limit with Alteryx is the amount of data that will fit in the memory on the machine. So Alteryx itself doesn't have any limits to number of records or number of fields.
Okay, good. And then also, again, the more dimensions you bring in, the more complex the model becomes. Have you ever come across some kind of a sweet spot with respect to all that? I know it's kind of a difficult question, but Matt, any advice on an optimal number of dimensions to bring in or variables?
Richard, you might be able to answer that one better than me.
Yeah, sure. If we're talking doing the predictive processing, of course, in that case, we're going to be leveraging R. And R has kind of got a limitation based off of data and memory and that sort of thing. So you want to try to be, utilize sampling and things like that. One thing I'll add to that is that we're actually investigating some ways of taking a look at the scalability of R, partnering with folks like, or investigating relationships with folks like Revolution Analytics and some other open source types of situations. But
okay, that's great.
And one other thing I would add right there from an input-output standpoint is, we do have the ability to output to any sort of source we can input. So anything we can bring in, we can output right back to.
Pack out what you pack in, right?
Exactly.
Good stuff. Okay, good. Here's a really good question. One of the attendees asks, what are the major slowdown sub-processes that impact the overall effective latency of data to decision or to insight? How can your platform accelerate the overall processing speed, especially in the data discovery phase? That's kind of
Matt, I'm digesting that for a minute.
I
think that's in the Q&A window, right? So I can read that one.
It is in the Q&A. In other words, there are lots of different pieces and parts to the process here, and I think the attendee is looking for some information on how Alteryx helps expedite. Obviously, you've built in some workflows, you've built in some different algorithms that people can use. I think really in the discovery and kind of playing around with the data to figure out which direction to go, I think that's where he's focusing his attention.
Yeah, and what I might add to that is, from being a user of Alteryx for a few years now, that's what Alteryx was kind of purpose-built for, was for doing a lot of those things. So even down to the code level, it was built for doing a lot of that, just data investigation and trying to figure things out. From something as simple as the browse tool, which is one of the simplest tools that are on the tool set, that just allows you to view your data before and after a process has been executed, so you can see what's happened or take a look at things. With some other applications, it's just difficult to even just kind of see your data as a part of a process. So, I mean, it was really purpose-built for doing some of that stuff. So a lot of the tools that are in there are specifically around doing a lot of that data investigation.
Okay, good. And one of the attendees wants to know, you talked about third-party data. Are those brought in as separate packages? The question specifically is the Experian household data part of the base package, or how do you price that?
Yeah, it is included in our professional edition. So all of the third-party data sources that we listed are included, and actually we also have additional, third-party data sources through our communications edition that's specifically targeted towards, hardline, wireless, and cable providers.
Okay, great, great. And that's all incredibly useful stuff. I mean, I know there are some companies out there that were already doing that kind of thing, but I have to commend you guys on baking that into the solution and into the package, because it really facilitates the, talk about the end-to-end process. It really helps move someone from ground zero to somewhere significant fairly quickly, right?
Exactly.
Okay, good. Here's an interesting question, too. It's kind of a curveball question. One of the attendees asks, I'm interested in hearing how the panel feels that natural language processing can currently meet the needs of these solutions, and also how they see NLP changing over time. Is there anything going on? We've talked a bit about text analytics and semantics, but is there anything in the realm of natural language processing that you guys are doing?
At this time, that's not anything we're really investigating, to my knowledge.
Yeah, that's not surprising. That's pretty complex stuff.
Yeah, the only thing I might add that I have taken a look at it all is various packages within R that we're able to leverage that do some things like that. But I'm not an expert in that area, but that is one place to look, or that we have looked in the past too, when customers have wanted to incorporate some of that stuff, like something as simple as a sentiment analysis.
Gotcha. And here's one really good question. This will be the last one, as we're over 10 minutes past the hour, but this is a great question. One of the attendees asks, in a data warehouse environment, oftentimes a non-expert user will run the so-called SQL query from hell, causing all kinds of performance issue. What stops them from designing and running the equivalent poorly designed queries or analytic workflows in Alteryx? Do you have any guardrails in there, or how can an implementation avoid someone throwing such a nasty query at the system?
Yeah, so for example, doing an n-dimensional join on something, right?
Right.
Yeah, so Alteryx will, what it does is it allows you to see the data as it's processing, so you can see visually what's going on, how long it's taking, what sort of pipe these things are taking up, things like that. So that's one way that we've tried to just kind of notify the user. Now, if you're talking about something where somebody's using this in a server deployment, the IT group is going to be able to manage that sort of thing, the resources and things like that.
Well, that's great stuff, folks. Thank you so much for taking all those great questions, and thank you out there in the audience for asking lots of great questions. You can see this month is analytics. Next month is operational intelligence. We're going to do a whole special overview of the operational intelligence space. It's a term that's getting quite a bit of use these days, but in rather different ways. So we're going to try to break that all down in March. Then April is intelligence, May is integration, and with that, folks, we're going to bid you farewell. We will archive this presentation at insideanalysis.com, so feel free to hop online at any point. Go to insideanalysis.com, look under Webcasts, the briefing room, and recent events, and you can see the 90-odd briefing rooms that we've done in the last 2.5 years. We've done quite a few of these things. So big thank you to all of our presenters today, and a big thank you to all of you out there for your time and attention. With that, we're going to bid you farewell. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.